What we're looking at today, or this series, is how do we get IT services that actually work? And it's very, very closely related to what Dennis Parks is taking you for in IT product design. Except he's doing the more techie stuff of how to do the design work, and we will be looking at what is the business need and a lot of the risks that we find in the way we develop our services and launch them out to the poor unsuspecting punters out there who are going to use these things. So what I think we'll probably start off with is just have a look briefly at the module spec, which is about like this. It opens up somewhere. And I'll take you through the module spec and then I'll kind of introduce the sort of things that we'll be doing for the assignment. So the wording here is in the module info, it's the document there, and it kind of introduces you to the way that we're going to explore what actually happens. And we're going to be working really at the top level, at the highest strategic levels of why do we want all of this technology around us? What does it do for us, and how do we actually end up getting value from it all? And what we'll be using as part of the way of understanding what's needed and where the difference between IT service management is positioned as opposed to IT product development is, we'll use a representation of what's called the enterprise architecture, the Zapman architecture, which you may have come across. If not, you will come across it shortly, and then you'll begin to see just where and how our two modules actually connect across together. Most importantly are the outcomes. The first one is that you will be able to show at the end of the semester what actually is IT service management all about. How does it help, or how should it help businesses to do whatever it is that they want to do and do it efficiently and effectively. You'll be able to critically evaluate various ways of satisfying that business need and then provide some sort of a design, but not just this is the answer. The thing that's most important is that critical justification of your choices. So these are some of the things we may or may not cover. And then the important part is the assignment, which is going to be something around 3,000 words of a report, which we'll be starting next week and beginning to work on week by week as we go through it. And the workshop section, the second half of this 2-hour block, will be very much based around you applying the stuff you've researched and learned in the first hour, which is kind of, we call it a seminar, and the other half is a workshop. Now, I don't teach these sort of modules in the classic way where I stand spouting for an hour and you go to sleep. I will introduce the context as briefly as I can, and then you will start researching to find answers, to find useful sources of material that answer various of the questions that I will be posing to you. And then in the second half, you'll be sort of applying those new ideas, those new frameworks, those new theories into either today, probably a little bit of a case example, but later on, probably next week, into developing some of this parts of your assignment. And each week, in that second hour, I'll be working with each of you, reviewing your ideas. You'll be bouncing ideas off me. I'll be helping you to develop ideas so that you end up with a seriously good piece of work. And then around about week 11, the week before the end of term, we will have what I call a formal review of your final draft. So this is, you'll come to me upstairs in my office with your assignment having already submitted online to turn it in. So I can then annotate it with my comments, my thoughts, to help you improve it. And then you will have a further 3 or 4 weeks over at Christmas, and you will submit it around about, I think, Friday the 3rd or so of January, finally, having embedded all of those good ideas and improvements. And then during that week, the week beginning the 6th of January, I think it is, I will issue another schedule, and you will come and see me in my office, again with your final submission on a memory stick, and I will mark it there and then with you. That will be the final mark, other than subject to moderation, you know, the usual caveats that until the exam board has happened, you don't know those marks are 100% certain, but hey, they probably will be. The other thing, I don't know whether you've heard about it yet or not, but I tend to go to help publish the best work that you guys provide. Now, I think quite a few of you did that article for the magazine Computers for Everyone last year, didn't you? And about 60 or 70 of those are in the final stage of being edited into the journal, which I will then publish up on the website as soon as I've got it. I'm going to repeat that this year with this module, and anything that gets better than 65% will then be included in this ebook. And one of you, happy that bunch, is going to volunteer to just do the topping and tailing and editing to produce this nice little ebook, and then I'll publish it hopefully sort of middle of next semester. And of course that means that you who have done well can immediately put into your CV that you've got a published article, and you're going to put the ISSN number and so on, and whoever does the editing will also be able to put in your CV that you edited an edited ebook. Here is it, and here it is. And of course there are very few universities that go in for publishing student work. And so you'll get one published this year from me, and then next year you've got, or the final year, when you come back after your placement, you will have opportunities for at least two more e-books to be, or e-articles to be published. In the third year, you have to score 70% and above to get an article included. We'll be using a standard template. We won't be using that evil IEEE template that we used last year. We're using a slightly better one, which is single column, and it's the Springer LNCS template, which we'll be using again for the articles here, or the reports. And it will be something like a six-page article, which will be about that 3,000 words or so. And I'll set you a broad topic, and you will each be able to choose a much narrower topic, which actually is closely relates to what you're interested in. So you'll be able to individually negotiate your topic for each of you, and that's what we'll be doing over the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then you'll start working on it. And then week 7, I think it is, well, it's 4 weeks from today, you'll have a reading week. The 5th week from today will be a reading week, because I shall be probably over in Las Vegas as a chair of a conference over there. So, kind of fun. Yeah. It's a very long journey, because to get the cheaper price I have to fly via somewhere like Miami on the way back, and I think via Dallas Fort Worth. So it's, you know, you've got 2 or 3 hours waiting somewhere, which is tedious, I have to say. So that's the introduction, very briefly what it's all about. How do we get decent systems there for our for our users? Now, let's switch that off temporarily. You will always find at the top of the basic study materials, there's a folder which has all sorts of interesting stuff that I just post up there. I'll send out an announcement when there's something new in there, just for current affairs, new things that have happened that are causing problems, or interesting successes, examples of how things work or don't work. So, for today. An introduction might be useful. We'll go through this briefly, see if there's anything interesting here. No, it's basically that first presentation puts it into larger text so you can see it.
So it's just a one piece of coursework?
A single piece of coursework, and you will be getting formative feedback week by week. So every week there is that opportunity to have sort of 5 minutes with me about what you're doing, what's good about it, and where you can possibly improve it even more. And one of the things I should be working with you to get perfect is citing and referencing.
I was dreadful that. You told me last year I was bad at it.
Well, we'll go back. I mean, if you go back to your UDO front page and to the Launchpad and go to the study skills section, you can still get back to them.
Didn't the uni publish on YouTube a video of Harvard referencing? I saw
They probably have done, and there is a very good set of resources in the study skills section. Top left-hand tab tile is citing and referencing, and they give you an online version of the Cite and Write book and course, and they also have their own our own Plato system, which helps you remember what plagiarism is about and how to avoid it. And also the second half of that is all about, again, going through how to lay out your references and those citations, which is a sort of self-comma 2012 close brackets, this is where I found that fact, this is where I found the idea from. So there's kind of quite a lot of things available to you. Let's see if there's anything useful here. I think I've taken you through this one last year, but we'll just go through it very briefly as a reminder. And I want to really refresh your mind, because we didn't have time to cover it in a lot of detail in ICS last year. But I want to think about what do we do with quotations, and how do we handle citing and referencing? And the important part is the why and the what. So quoting is where you actually copy directly what someone has said. And I want to remind you, like what I think I said that last year, I'm going to get more and more vigorous about it. I really don't actually want any direct quotations. In our field, business, computing, engineering, most of the materials that you're going to use are not written with enough care that it is worth bothering to waste your word count or page count with someone else's direct words. Because after you put them there, you then have to interpret them into the context that you're actually working with your assignment or your report. And I don't actually read quotations anyway. I have mental snowpape. So, and most of us are, we're not interested in the quotation because we're really interested in your thinking. Your writing, whether it's your writing or whether it's academic writing, we're trying to get inside your head or my head so that you understand how I'm thinking, and I'm trying to find out how you're thinking. So the fact that you found some words that you can copy and paste in there as a quotation, and you cited it, so it's not plagiarism, okay, it shows you can find information. That's the very, very lowest level of skill that you guys end up with. What I'm interested in, what you do with it. How does it relate to the problem at hand? How does it shed light on? Or what is the light that's being shed on your ideas, and what are you doing with generating useful answers? So if you write a piece of work and you put some quotations in, what you need to think about then is take them back out, and does it make sense without those quotations? And if it doesn't, then you need to do something about it. That means you've got to put in some text to explain what that quotation is about. Or if you've inserted a useful diagram or a useful chart, which is kind of facts, properly cited, do not ask the reader to work out what that graph or that chart means. Tell them what it is, why it's important, and how it contributes to your developing argument. Occasionally, a few quotations might be useful, but not very many. and also make sure that it is separated from your writing. So if it's only 4 or 5 words, quotes, double quotes around it. If it's 2 or 3 lines, indent it as an indented paragraph with a citation at the end of it. Now the citation is formally defined as the acknowledgement of this information or this assertion or this fact is found somewhere. Because let's face it, you're writing academic work here. You're not writing fairy tales. And in one sense, it is the use of citations in your writing or in my writing that distinguishes the writing from being a fairy tale. It says, this is the evidence, this is where I found this fact, this idea, this chart. And then you have to put a reference at the back of the document which allows the interested reader to go find the original source. Which leads to a thought that if this is the real purpose of a citation and a reference, then the formalities, the formal Harvard referencing, which says you'd only put a page number in the citation if it's a quotation, can be extended to say, actually, it's kind of useful to the reader to have a page number anyway in a citation. Because let's think about a book that thick, and some of your textbooks are kind of a bit thick. And I am not going to read 1,000 pages to find a 3-line quotation. Are you? Have we got time? No. Because a 1,000-page textbook's probably about 250 to 300,000 words, and that takes a fair bit of time to get through. So we don't mind if you do add into your citation the page number of a non-quotation, so that it makes it easier for the interested reader. It also makes it easier for you to find it again at sometime later. So it supports your statement. It also says, I got this idea from someone else, so you're not stealing their ideas. We don't like theft. We get very protective of our physical property, don't we? We don't like people nicking them. And the other, so, you know, but we're a little bit less sort of rigorous about ideas and music. I'm not going to throw any stones or cast any sort of make any aspersions about your character, but we tend these days to have a fairly lax attitude to acquiring music and videos and such like off the internet without paying the right royalties. And the same goes with ideas about, you know, from off the internet or off e-journals and so on. It is actually theft to use other people's ideas if you don't give the credit. But the third thing is to demonstrate your ability to find information, to research many different perspectives. One of the things we're really keen on is that you approach a subject with an open mind. So rather than wanting to prove that this idea is the right one and I've got a stream of sources that all support it, we actually want you to find many different perspectives, different ways of looking at that problem, and then look at how you critically evaluate those ideas and bring them together with a synthesis into your own set of ideas. Now, sometimes you've got a really good article or textbook and there's a lovely quotation or a lovely set of ideas with references there. Now sometimes, especially as an undergraduate student, it may be difficult to get that original source. So you would say Self 2008 cited in Self 2010 or Blogs 2010. And then you put the 2010 one, the later one, in your references. So you actually go back to the original author as well as identifying the source. But ideally, you shouldn't do that too often, because you really want to get at the primary data, because you're never sure that someone is actually reflecting correctly what the earlier author that was being cited is actually saying, until you've actually read it yourself. So where and when? Basically, every time you make an assertion, this is a fact, or this is an idea, I found it there. Even in programming, if you get into programming, which you will do this year because you're going to be doing SAS. Carrying on that.
I already did.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that later on. It's good stuff. Helps improve your employability very, very dramatically and improves your salary potential by 15 to 20%. But more about that later on. So basically, if you think about how you write, a paragraph of text, a few lines, should be about one or more ideas that kind of all hang together. And every single idea should have a citation. So if some of you guys say, Richard, how many sources do I need in my list of references? Well, how long's a bit of string? It's more, what's the density of citations? Have you actually justified every single thing that you said and identified its source? So a paragraph should have, every single paragraph should have at least one citation in it, and preferably several citations with appropriate references in the back. So, now if I were to answer your question, oh, I expect at least 10 sources in the references, what's going to happen?
10 it is.
10 it is, yeah, quite. Now so you'll do your research until you've got 10 sources, because that meets Richard's criterion, and that's it. That's not very helpful. I want you to think about what is an acceptable number of sources, given the range of ideas that you're using to support that analysis. So it provides that credibility. Now I want to talk a little bit now about something we didn't really cover too much in your first year. In the second year, we really want you to start getting much more into the idea of critical thinking, critical analysis. And it's all about applying as you write, so what? Why did I put that sentence in there? What does it contribute? Is it valuable? Does it move things forward? Or is it just some waffly padding? If it's waffly padding, get rid of it. So a few of the questions, and you'll be able to get some of this from one or two of Stella Cottrell's books that you'll find down in the bookshop about critical thinking is one of her good books. Another one is writing. There's a huge bookcase full of books for sale about how to write, how to do critical thinking, study skills and so on. And they're all very good ones. You might want to buy one or two of those perhaps. But some things that come out of critical thinking is, why have I made that statement? Does it really mean what I meant it to mean? Does it add to my argument? Does it keep building that case, that analysis that I've done to prove or disprove something or come to a conclusion? And often you will find that you've accidentally asked or left open 2 or 3 more questions which need answering quickly. Try and answer those questions very, very quickly in the next paragraph or the next sentence, so that the reader doesn't get derailed. Because if the reader starts thinking, here's an interesting question, and you haven't answered it, I'll get sort of diverted from reading what you're writing. Because you're trying to actually lead me on a little journey from the start of the report, which is kind of the question. You're trying to lead me all the way through to the final answer. This is why this is a good answer, and you've justified that as you go through the whole of the writing. And so you don't want to leave any opportunity for me to get distracted into my own thoughts. You are taking me on this guided path, and you really don't want me to get distracted and start looking at interesting rabbit holes and so on and so forth. Because we're like that, we do kind of divert ourselves. So I want to give you a little example of how we get from kind of journalese, global broadband subscriptions increased by 75%. This was a sort of simple little statement from somewhere. Now, if you apply those so what sort of questions to that, what questions do we have in our mind about something like that?
Why did it increase by 75%?
Why did it increase? Yep.
No, I said,
Over how long? Yep.
where,
Where? Yep, good one. Why? Yep. Is it important to anybody that it's grown?
The effect,
Them?
the effects it has on people.
The impact and the effects? Yep. And who said it? Where does it come from? So I think you covered pretty much all of that. The one you haven't actually covered is the actual how much, how big is it? You see, because it could be 75% of a very small number or 75% of a very big number, and they're kind of different. One of the things you notice if you're looking at the news and the newspapers and so on, often, particularly in health, they say, oh, this drug increases your risk of a heart attack by 20%, or 50%, or 100%.
Those are always fun.
They're always funny because for that particular circumstance, it could be your actual risk is 0.01% and doubling it doesn't matter a darn. And if you look carefully at a lot of the health scares, they are very small risks being doubled or tripled. So who cares? Well, you know, I mean, think about it. If we are all going to die anyway, so we have a 100% risk of dying as humans over a period of time. In fact, life is a terminal illness. We all die. If you think about things like the risk of heart attacks and other such, and death from heart attack because of cholesterol, and then look at some of the cholesterol drugs, the anti-cholesterol drugs like statins, you have to treat 75 people with statins in the UK. Bear in mind you're treating about 5 million people are on statins out of the 70 million people in the UK. You have to treat 75 people to avoid one death. So that means less than 1.5% probability of success of being treated by statins to avoid a death. You have to treat 10 or 12 people to avoid one heart attack. So you've got 10% probability of success for taking that particular drug. So in total, about 11.5% probability of success for taking this drug. And there are, anecdotally, there are risks up to around about 50% of all people who take statins have some sort of adverse reaction, lesser to very, very serious in 1 in 10,000. So you're saying, I've got a risk of something not very happy of 30 to 50%, and a 10% chance of success. It's interesting when you start putting in numbers like that. And we have a very interesting approach to statistics as well in this sort of field. Something that's 1% or 10% ain't going to happen to me, typically, is our reaction. 50%, yeah, it might do. 95%, that's actually kind of serious. So percentages are kind of things you need to think about very, very carefully indeed. And here's a reworded version of that. I know it's not a long time ago when this was put together. It's still all percentage based actually, because I didn't have the precise numbers. Although actually, well, there is one here. 60% of 20 million is a fair proportion. But gives you a date, when it applied, who said it, identifies that particularly the ISPs and the carriers are interested in this, and today they were talking a bit about, on Radio 4 at lunchtime, about why it is that you can buy a new house in Basingstoke, I think it was, brand new house, and it doesn't have broadband. And the government wants to get 95% penetration of high-speed broadband. Sorry, they get broadband but don't get 2 megabits. And the government has a 95% target by 2017 for 95% of all houses to have high-speed broadband, defined as 20 megabits a second or better. So the UK back in 2003 was 5%, whereas Korea back then had 20% of penetration. And then a year or so later, according to the Times, it had increased in the UK to a better level. A bit of apples and oranges because it's percentage of inhabitants versus percentage of households, which is again something you need to think about when you see statistics. What are the units of measure? And when you start getting into the field of analytics, which you will be doing over next semester using SAS, units of measure become really important because you can end up with a whole fruit salad of different sort of measures that you're trying to compare and contrast. And apples don't really compare terribly well with cherries or olives, as a for example. And you can get really weird and different sort of units happening, and that's very, very misleading. Sometimes people do it quite deliberately to try and help you to come up with the answer they want, even if it's not the right one. You need to think about where your sources are. Now, in the work you're doing here, in this module, the sources that I'm particularly interested in you using are, well, it's the professional sources. The ones I gave you that list last year, if I remember correctly, sort of ZD, Net, TechNet, and so on, because they are Computing, Computer Weekly, and a whole range of other ones, because those are the ones which are happening now. They're the ones which are being read by your future colleagues out in business who are trying to deal with real current affairs issues like security and so on. So the conference article or conference presentations, they're not too bad. They are comparatively current. They typically will be based on research over the previous year and a half, probably. Referee journals, the International Journal of X, Y, or Z, the sort of stuff you get through EBSCO, Emerald, ACM Digital and so on, those have a slightly longer gestation period, so they may be 2-3 years out of date. So finding those professional sources can be really valuable, because they tell you what's happening today and yesterday. But these are some of the different sources. And textbooks, well, it depends how new it is. A textbook takes about 2 to 3 years to write and publish. And then once they've been published, if they are a sort of beginner's level textbook that goes through a new edition every couple of years, what typically happens is a new chapter or two is added each year, and some of the original content is not updated for 5, 10, 15 years. And you can get some bizarre things in there. I remember one which was, when was it, late, about 2006, 2007 edition, and it had some photos of modern computing equipment, and I recognised some of the photos as IBM mainframe computers that I had worked on in the 1970s. Modern computing, right. So we need also to think about how recently your sources of information were written. And typically, the more recent, the better. But you have to be a little bit careful, because sometimes it's important to give that historical perspective of the idea. So you might, if you were looking at, say, relational databases, because you're doing databases with Dave for his, aren't you? One of the foundation theory of relational databases came from a guy called Ted Codd around about 1964 or 5, I think it was. And it might although Dave disputes that Headcod's original article is readable by anybody because it's a bit sort of set theory, you might still want to go back there because that's the case. In our sort of field, informatics, the use of information systems, you probably would be justified, for example, in going back to the 1980s and the early 1990s for some of the theories about how businesses develop their strategies. Porter's value chain of 1985, I think it was, is kind of a useful tool to use. It still poses some interesting questions. The Zachman architecture framework comes from the mid-90s, if not earlier. And so you have to think about what you're trying to do. What is the answer you're trying to, or the question you're trying to answer, and is it important to give that historical perspective of how things have moved? And if you're looking at business process re-engineering, perhaps, then you might want to go back to about 1993, 2 or 3 when it's first developed, and then 2 years later, Hammer and Champe, who had invented it and published it widely in the early 90s, then said, 1995 I think it was, their article, that said, if you apply it, it only works in 30% of the occasions that people do it. The other 70% is a catastrophe, and if you're really incompetent, you will destroy your business. So you've got a kind of a business process or business improvement mechanism which has a 30% chance of success and a 70% chance of doing serious damage to your organisation. So you need to go back to there and then see how that argument develops. There are aspects of it, for example, in BPR, that are really good ideas. It's just how you go about doing it. Do I need to take you through plagiarism, guys, and how to avoid it? The best way of avoiding it is not to cut and paste, not to provide quotations. You all did the Plato exercise last year, didn't you? So you know what it is. If you want to remind yourself, go find Plato and go through those sections on plagiarism. And if you want to refresh your memory about citing and referencing, again, go to Plato and work through the citing and referencing sections. And you will no doubt get a little bit better. And I will be helping you over the next few weeks as well. There's a useful little item here. Sometimes you've got a web page that you don't know how to get the date of publication. That little item here will take you neatly through the steps. And using a clever feature, a clever undisclosed design feature in Google and the search mechanisms there, which will actually allow you to find out exactly which year and what date a particular web page was originally published. So that really is a rapid review of some of the important things. Do you feel you would like an opportunity to go back to Plato now, or would you like to do something more useful and move into the main materials? It's up to you guys. If you want to sort of divert into going back to Plato and using it, you're welcome to. Or I will go on and we'll jump into week 2. Learn about useful things. Yeah, why not? Let's do that. Now, folks, if we jump into week 2, just to get a little bit ahead of ourselves and use the time helpfully and effectively, you'll see that we've got a little document here on a case study sources. We'll just have a quick look at that. Yeah. There are some. We'll be looking over the next couple of weeks or so at 3 classics of failures of IT projects. There are many, many others, but these are quite interesting because there's some common themes, and these two are really very, very interesting because Denver City built a new international airport back in the 80s or 90s, we'll find out from there. And they had really serious problems with their baggage handling system that kept them out of that airport out of service for about a year and a half. And then, who remembers when Terminal 5 opened at Heathrow?
I remember having a lot of trouble with it.
They had a rather a lot of trouble, as you said, yes. And comparing that with that provides a really interesting set of lessons that somebody really didn't learn when they did that. So that provides the direct links for you. So what we're going to start off with, folks, is diving straight into the way we're going to be working all of this semester, which is I will introduce a topic, I'll give you a bit of a context, and then I will give you some questions, because I do not give you any answers. I give you questions. You see, if I give you answers, you're going to stop learning. If I give you questions, then you learn how to find interesting questions and how to find interesting answers with interesting sources of information that help you develop that way of looking at the problem and finding out what went wrong, why it went wrong, what should be done about it, and why doing it that way is going to be the right thing. And that's what you're going to be doing next year when you go out onto your placement year, because we hope that all of you will have a placement.
Oh, there's actually a chance you can't get one.
We take account of that, and we have other options if you really can't get one. However, you all did a little bit of SAS or jump, didn't you, last year with Richard Hill?
Yes.
Did quite a bit of SAS.
Well, the good news, folks, is that on the 30th of October, we will be laying on a bus.
Oh yeah, you're the really good one at SAS, aren't you?
Yeah, I can be. I used to be. Not so sure about mine because I've not had time to remember it all. But yeah, we will be laying on a bus to go down to Brunel University on the 30th of October to go to a SAS careers fair. And you will be. What they will lay on there are workshops for writing CVs and workshops on interview skills. And they will also have around about 15 major companies who use SAS big time, and they'll be giving you little half-hour presentations all the way through the day about how SAS is used and analytics is used and so on.
Will these be any of our placement opportunities?
They will be your placement opportunities, yes. Among others. It won't be all of the opportunities, but there are a huge range of opportunities for placement years if you can do SAS. On that matter, and we'll be letting you know over the next week or so, you can actually download a copy of SAS onto your laptops, your home PCs. You can either have it like you did last year, a full PC version, or you can set up what we call Analytics U, which is the student version, which runs in a virtual machine. So you need to get the Oracle virtual machine system downloaded and installed on your PC, and then you download from SAS the Analytics U version that runs inside this little Linux box and acts as a virtual machine that connects to your web, or you connect your web browser to it, and then you've got this beautiful environment sitting on your PC. Now the advantage for you of that, as compared to the full version you've got on the PCs here, it's free for students, it's reasonably powerful. It's better in some respects, a better interface in some respects than what we've got on here as SAS 9.3. And it uses what's called SAS Studio, which is the new version of SAS, which will become, in a little while, SAS's offering to SMEs. And so if you guys get experience with using SAS Studio, this Analytics U version, that'll be even more valuable to you, because it's what SMEs will be using probably within the next couple of years. I don't know what timescale, I've not been told by SAS, but I've been told that it will be their SME offering. And that then means it's likely to leak out or spread much more widely than it is at the moment, which is mainly big organisations. So there's that, and I'm not sure who's actually going to organise that particular trip. I may or may not have got back from the conference by then, but certainly we would like all of you to go on that trip so that you get to see the types of organisations, and we'll post up the details on the program pages of Blackboard for you. So that'll again help you. So what we're going to do is to think a little bit about services. We're going to do it mainly by research, and mostly in these two sessions, as I say, I'll pose you various questions. Some of it will be research. There'll be a question that you have to go and research for a few minutes, or 10, 15, 20 minutes, and find 5 or more good sources, some academic sources, some recent business type sources, and build your working bibliography, so that at the end of each week you should have found at least 15, 20 interesting and valuable sources that you can use as you develop your assignment. At the end of the semester, you should have developed your working resources, something like, what's about 10 times 15? You should have 150 potential sources in your list of these references that might be of value to your assignment. And then you apply it. So the next item, what we want to look at now, thinking about your experience, all the things you do, because we're all using the web a lot these days. And in groups of sort of 2 or 3, find 1 or 2 interesting web-based services out there, whatever they are, and then think about who is the customer who's going to use it. Can we find out the views of the users? Can we find out how much that service is used, what the level of usage is? Think about the features, the functions, think about usability, and then do a kind of a SWOT analysis of that whole thing. Then, having collected your information, start analysing that, critically evaluating it, and come to some conclusions which you can justify based on the evidence there and logical analysis about that service. Is it a good service? If so, why? What aspects are good and why? Where are the problems with it? Is it really as popular as people claim it to be? And. Does that make sense to you guys? If you don't understand it, if it doesn't make complete sense, always ask so that I can clarify it to you. And then once you're clear what the question is, then you can go and do the research and get started with it. So what do you reckon the first step is going to be? Find an appropriate IT service that's relevant to you, that you're interested in, so that you've got, and where you can find some of that information. What sort of service do you think you might be interested
Google
in?
Analytics.
You can find it through Google Analytics, yeah, that'd be one of the ways of finding some of those, yep, yeah. What sort of service is going to be interesting to groups? When I say that, how many of you? 2, 4, 6, 12 of you. So maybe groups of 4, 3 groups of 4, 3 different, or maybe 3 similar, or 3 the same, approaches to an IT service. What's going to be interesting that you can do in the next hour?
Something popular, like, I don't know, Twitter, Reddit, that kind of stuff.
Think about Twitter. Yeah. That's an interesting one. Yeah. What else,
Then
Mark?
we can easily identify, well, not really easily, but identify more or less quickly
Yeah.
who uses it, and then from there working out
Okay.
the answers. Whereas if it's just some random website, you first need to understand what the website is about, and only then we'll be able to understand what are the customer base, what are they aiming at.
Yeah. Anybody thought of the new Udo interface? Why not?
You're going to struggle to answer some of those questions.
Hun?
You're going to struggle to answer some of those questions.
Okay. Yep.
Especially when the old one is still running. It sometimes still redirects you to the old one for some reason.
All right, we might add in that extra criterion, an IT service that you've all used and that you like or that you hate.
You know.
Yeah.
I like you, I think it's
And basically what you need to do is come up with 5 sort of questions for each of those sections, because that will help you get a wider and broader perspective. Okay, time to start thinking.